tell me your name and who you're with?
My name is Carl Zebers. I'm a crane electrician that got laid off here. I worked for the port for 6 years, and now I'm out here with the rest of the people, basically just to let people know, what the heck happened. Anybody who wants to know, just ask, and we'll tell them.
All right, can you tell us what the heck happened?
Well, like I say, I worked there 6 years, and from the day I got there, practically, there was all this talk about privatization, being competitive, and this and that and everything else. And the tenants down there were complaining that the cost of the crane maintenance was too much, and we had to sit down and come up with something to help knock off $30 an hour off of the crane maintenance tariff. And we did that, and they still kept complaining and crying the whole time. I mean, this was within a year after me getting there, and even after they got this, they still complained about the cost and everything. And if you look at the numbers, it's only gone up like about, it hasn't even gone up 10% or 20% in 20 years. The maintenance tariff on these cranes. And anyway, to make a long story short, they said they were losing $1.5 million a year on the crane maintenance, and that we had to sit there and make concessions after we just signed a 3-year contract in June with them. They went the whole period, the whole duration of the negotiations, when they had every opportunity in the world when the contract was open to sit down and negotiate any kind of language in. They didn't do anything. And then after the contract was signed, sealed, delivered, they came up and started demanding these concessions from us, or we were going to lose our jobs. And we said, well, we'll work with you within the framework of the contract that you just signed, but that's it. And basically, they gave us a proposal of taking what amounted to about a 30% cut in wages, and we said no way. And one thing led to the other, and it was just a basic impasse, and we wound up getting laid off January 14th. So here we are, and our being out here now is just basically to inform the public of that. This is just really a microcosm of what I think is several overall complaints about the way that these people operate here. I know in my mind it was just dirty and low and underhanded the way they dealt with it, and they just didn't, in my view, deal and bargain in good faith. Period. That was it. The whole thing is about negotiation. We negotiated a contract through their bargaining agent. Their bargaining agent accepted the terms, signed the agreement, and then they turned around and said that's not good enough. They got to have what amounted to about a 30% pay cut, and we just said no. So that's it, and here we are. Here we sit.
All right, so who was the tenants that were demanding that $30 per hour be cut out?
Stevedoring Services of America, primarily. SSA, the tenant over there in Terminal 18, was the biggest and loudest, I think, of the whole thing. And they were just, in my view, were the ones who spearheaded this whole privatization movement to begin with. It never was, in my view, about $1.5 million any more than it was about 25 cents worth of postage stamps. It never was about the money. It was about control of the cranes and the maintenance on the cranes, and that's basically what it all came down to, as far as I can say.
Now, why wasn't there union backing, since they'd already signed a contract with you? Wasn't there some union backing to back you guys up?
Well, yeah, we've got the backing of the union, and we're completely within our rights. But in what we're doing here right now, but to sit down and to put a picket up and shut the job down is illegal. They would turn around and they'd have every lawyer in this city ready to serve us with an injunction, and they'd be perfectly within their legal rights to do so. That's when you're under contract. You're under contract. You cannot take and shut the job down. And if there's any kind of a picket goes up, these guys honor it. You're in violation of certain labor laws, is my understanding. So, you're really kind of hamstrung in that respect. And what we did was we negotiated with them as best we could, and as I said, basically came to an impasse on it, and just agreed that we weren't going to agree, and agreed to disagree, and it came to this, unfortunately, and a bunch of good people lost their jobs. I mean, there was just on the electrical crew alone, there was 250 years of collective experience on these cranes. We just had scads and scads of experience out there, and This was taking care of public assets, and they've turned it over to people coming up here from California and where, God knows where else, and that aren't licensed. As per Washington state law, you do electrical work, you're required to have a license. But apparently there's some little loophole in the law on that. I don't know exactly what it is, but they aren't licensed. They aren't people who served an electrical apprenticeship. You're working with 4160 out there. It's 4,000 volts. And anybody that's ever seen what that can do, it's like a bomb going off if you screw up with it. So, it poses safety problems, and there's just a raft of real issues here with this whole thing. Not safety not being the least of it, I think. So there's just a whole bunch of stuff going on here.
When was that original 3-year contract signed?
June. It was effective. It was signed actually like about June 6th. It was the first week of June.
Of this year?
This year, or 2001. I'm sorry. It was signed this past June. So it went into effect. I mean immediately. See, the way that we do it is they'll keep negotiating after the expiration of the contract. And then whatever it is they negotiate is retroactive back to the expiration of the last contract. See, and that way it avoids strikes and work stoppages and a lot of unpleasantries. But what they did is they had the contract ready to go by the first week of June, which is in pretty good shape. And they're a member of the National Electrical Contractors Association, so they're signatory to that agreement. Their agent bargained the contract. They signed it and everything, and then they turned around after the contract was signed and said, we got to have you back at the table here, boys. We need this and that and everything else, and this, that, and everything else amounted to about a 30% pay cut, and we said no. That's it.
Now, it sounds to me then that they violated the contract. Can you take them to court over this?
As I understand it, there are unfair labor practices that have been filed. There's litigation that's pending, and that the thing has been turned over to the union's lawyers. Any further than that, you'd have to discuss it with union officials. I'm not at liberty to discuss that, but my understanding is that the thing is in the hands of the union's lawyers now. So,
are there precedents that you know of that would lead you to believe that there might be some positive outcome to this?
Not being a labor lawyer, and just an electrician, I really couldn't speak to that. But just to me, in my mind, common sense tells you, it's just a simple matter of right and wrong. But the law gets a little bit beyond that and a little bit more involved in that. But I feel personally that we have a pretty good case here, and in fact, a very good case. I think that there's just been some things done that have severely wronged us. And I feel like there's been some cause for litigation here, and some cause for retribution legally. But that's just me speaking. I'm not speaking for any of myself here.
All right. How about other unions in the greater Seattle area? Have they come to your support?
We've had and enjoyed a lot of moral support. We've had people come out here and help, just give us moral support, not actually participate, but, in the picketing or anything, but they've come by and it's just, it's just like, hang in there, you guys. It's a good fight, and we really appreciate what you're doing. And a lot of these people are like Teamsters and that. They've got contracts coming up, and, they know what they're in for here. And they know that it's going to be a tough fight. So, they're offering us a lot of moral support, and up to this point, basically, that's really all we're asking is just that they understand and listen to us and understand what our fight is. And, basically taking it from there, I think they'll figure how this fight is going to affect their fight. I mean, it's a common thing. It's something that affects us all, I believe. And it's in everyone's best interest to sit there and to familiarize themselves with our issues here.
How has the media coverage been of your fight?
They could do a lot better, I believe, and I'm disappointed, frankly. You're the first reporter that I've talked with, a television reporter, and I've had some people from not the traditional press here discuss things with me, but people from the two main newspapers just haven't been here. I was shocked. We had a rally that was scheduled for September 11th down here, and our business representative just said decency demands that we call this off. I mean, it just made no sense to have it that day. And he was talking with the port police, and they said, yes, absolutely. The commissioners, I guess, wanted to have it that day, but then they decided because there could be no police coverage that they called it off, and they rescheduled it the 13th. Well, we came here September 13th, 2 days after the September 11th incident in New York and Washington, D.C. We had the head of airport security sitting in here discussing security issues at SeaTac Airport, and not one single reporter from either the PI or the Times, which I thought was really, really, well, it just didn't show much concern for the issues as far as I'm concerned. When you consider the circulation numbers that they have and what was being discussed in there, as important as it was and as recent as that incident had been. I mean, it was just like 2 days afterwards, and they were talking about it here, and nobody was here from the Times to the PI. So,
sounds like they have a little bit of a blind spot.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Could be a big blind spot.
Could be very large, much larger than what we want to really admit. But like I said earlier, they could definitely do better than what they've done, I think.
All right, so if you were going to give a message to people out there in the greater King County area that were unfamiliar with the situation here, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that what these people are doing with their tax dollars is a sham. It's a disgrace. And, you know, it's the same thing to me as walking up, just taking money right out of their pocket and giving it to somebody that has got more than he'll ever be able to spend in his life. It's a scam. It's just a big scam. And they'd better open their eyes up and start paying attention to what's going on down here in this commission chambers.
My name is David Personius. I'm a member of Electricians Union, IBW 46. I'm not a spokesperson for it, but I am a dues-paying member.
All right, and what brings you out here today?
Well, seemed to have been some kind of a breakdown in communication on whose work this is and whether we have a binding contract in place.
All right, so tell me about the, let's go back to the beginning. When did you first start hearing about that there might be problems with your jobs down here?
Well, I hired in here in 1992, and I know whenever Local 302's contract came up for renewal, they would always threaten to privatize and outsource the work. And last year, well, actually 2 years ago, Local 302's contract expired in December of '99, and we've heard about it since then. And it came to reality on January 14th. They laid off the entire crane crew of both unions, Local 302 and Local 46. Unfortunately for the public, the port is making policy decisions behind closed doors and not inviting the public in to discuss which direction they're going with the public's money.
Local 302, how many people were involved with that?
I think there were 19 members of Local 302, and there were originally 17 members of Local 46. One guy retired, so we're not counting that spot anymore, but full manning would have been that spot plus more. We were undermanned. They said we cost too much. Now they've replaced us with workers whose wage and benefit package exceeds what we were getting. So go figure that one out.
All right, now I also understand that you had negotiated successfully at first appearance, negotiated a contract with the Port of Seattle that was good back in June of last year, is that right?
Local 46, its contract expired on May 31st, and so they were in negotiations 3 months prior to that, and the port made known about a year ago that they wanted to make some changes. And Local 46, of course, told them, well, go to your certifying bargaining agent, which was called NECA, National Electrical Contractors Association, and we'll be glad to sit down and talk about any changes you want to make. Well, the Port of Seattle didn't submit any changes to their bargaining agent, so when it came time to bargain with all the electrical contractors in town, when the ports came up, there was no changes known, so no changes were made or even discussed. We ratified that contract on May 29th, and it became effective June 4th of 2001. And shortly after that, the port said, well, we want these concessions. And we said, wait a minute, you just had your chance to negotiate. You didn't do it. And they said, that doesn't matter. we want these concessions, we have that power. And now it's a discussion for attorneys. That's where it's at now.
So what was the Port of Seattle asking for that wasn't in the contract originally?
Well, they wanted some serious concessions on which days of the week we worked for our 40-hour work week. They wanted to change our overtime premiums. They wanted to change our shift differentials for working a graveyard or a swing shift. Our historic jurisdiction as electricians, which is covered by WSHA and RCW and by OSHA, they wanted us to make concessions on those areas. It was pretty broad.
Do you have any knowledge that it was actually SSA, Stevedoring Services of America, that might have influenced the port in renegotiating your contracts?
I don't have any specific knowledge of that. I know SSA as a business wanted to get better rates. All businesses do. They go and negotiate better rates, and they put numerous things on the table to use in bargaining. I wasn't invited to those meetings, so anything I would say would just be guesswork.
How about one of the previous people that I was talking with mentioned that, to his knowledge, that SSA's, the port doing work with SSA at port facilities was in fact driving away certain businesses that had been here previously. They didn't want to deal with SSA.
I don't know if it's SSA. I know port policy in general over the past 10 years, or actually 20 years, you can see that numerous large shipping companies have left the Seattle waterfront for other places. Do we want to recognize SSA as being the cause of that? I don't think so. I think the Port of Seattle commissioners have to own that. In any breakdowns in public policy or changes, the Port of Seattle commissioners, who are elected by the citizens of King County and who are supposed to be working at their behest of all the citizens, not just a select few that might meet at various dinner clubs around town, all the citizens. Port of Seattle, once upon a time, 1898, laws were made in the Constitution so that public property couldn't be given away, and the laws were made because the Seattle waterfront today, which is now the Port of Seattle as the entity, had been given away to the railroads. That's why the law was put in place. Well, now here we are 100 plus years later, and it's the same battle that was waged by the founders of this city. So it's kind of dramatic that we're fighting the same battle today that those founders were fighting. But I'm a proud member of the community. My family's been here for 6 generations, so I know that my forefathers fought this same battle a long time ago.
And you probably didn't imagine that you would have to be fighting it again then.
No, not really. I didn't imagine anything like that. I'm just a working man trying to earn a living,
So do you have any knowledge of why businesses over the past 20 years would have been leaving the Port of Seattle and, let's say, going to places like Port of Tacoma instead?
The word we got is Port of Tacoma was offering better land rates. So, if you're a business, you're going to look at dollars and cents, bean counters,
So what changes would you like to see? If you were a Port of Seattle commissioner, what changes would you be implementing in your term?
Well, right now I've got a little bit of self-interest there. I'd like to have my job back. It was a pretty good job. I think there's a dependency that we're placing into the shipping companies and the stevedoring companies, which puts the public's assets at risk, because if the shipping or stevedoring companies suddenly decide to leave town, all the monies that the port has borrowed to finance the improvements to lure them here in the first place, then we taxpayers are going to be liable for it. And that kind of dependency is not good for the taxpayers as a whole. It's it's supply and demand. There's only so much waterfront space here where they can unload cargo, and rather than us just giving it to them on a gold platter, I think it would be better to try and get better deals for our real estate.
My name is Miles Sundin, and I used to work with Port of Seattle. I was employed there for 12 years. Now I'm unemployed. I was replaced by a private corporation, my public job. Why I'm here today? Well, it's kind of a dual role. I'm here today for two reasons. One, I'm here because they turned my job, public job, over to a private corporation and broke, what I feel, they broke a union contract. That was a contract that involved my employment. Two, I'm here because of my role in the community and how I feel about our community, our state, and what's happening and how the port is ignoring our community and ignoring its role and what its role should be in our community. I kind of say that I have a taste in my mouth that I can't get out. And it all comes from coming to a commission meeting here where we're going to discuss the outsourcing or privatization of the Port of Seattle's assets. And I was greeted with such arrogance that it left that taste of arrogance in my mouth, and I'll never be able to spit it out as long as I live. And it has opened my heart to a lot of different areas of the city. And I've seen what goes on, and I've seen both sides. I've seen the insides of this beautiful building that was built with taxpayers' money, and I've seen the outside where people sleep in the streets and are starving. So that's why I'm here.
Do you feel that it was stevedoring Services of America that was in fact pushing the port towards moving you guys out of the picture?
Moving us out of the picture is a good way to put it. What it is, and what I found, and I'm convinced in my heart and soul that it's a big word called privatization. And it's a combination of an ugly word that people need to be more aware of, and it's one that this Port of Seattle uses. It's called a public-private partnership. It's a very ugly word when you really get into the depth of it. We investigated Stevedoring Services of America, their holdings around the world, and found that they're privatizing everywhere. They're privatizing around the world, third world countries. They're also privatizing in the United States. I think it's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. They could not deal with a public port down there. I believe it is, and they're working at building their own private port to compete with that public port. So everywhere you look, the SSA, Stevedoring Services of America, is moving towards privatization, and they're being funded by the World Bank. Now, we don't know if there's World Bank funding here. We do know that the port has what they call an industrial development corporation that they've formed, and it is a financial funding corporation. And what they do is they use the taxpayers' loan rates, what we've got through our good credit ratings, and give it to private institutes, such as Stevedoring Services of America. They just had a $300 million rebuild of Harbor Island. That was all for Stevedoring Services of America and to increase their profits.
All right, I'd heard from somebody earlier that they were saying that the port working with Stevedoring Services of America was in fact driving off businesses instead of bringing in businesses as the port presents. Can you address that?
Yes, I can. In our research, we had access to a lot of internal port documents, and in some of the senior staff meetings, they discussed the fact that some of the major shippers that left were upset with having to deal with Stevedoring Services of America, and perhaps was involved in their decision to move from Seattle to Tacoma. And it wasn't costs worth the issue, but it was the middleman taking the money out, and that would be the stevedoring firm.
All right, and by the middleman taking the money out, is that these firms would have had to pay more by going through Stevedoring Services, or that they weren't happy with then what the port was getting, the port's return on the whole thing, or both?
Well, you know, that's a real tough issue to pinpoint as far as where the money went. Well, we do know that in the HDS 21 report, actually in the meetings they reported that the port was undercharging their customers at least 10%, their customers in their seaport. So they could have taken more money in just from their customers, but it's hard to say whether the port was undercutting and giving Stevedoring Services of America a better break, and that made people angry and made the other shippers angry, or they were angry just because they had to pay the middleman. So it's a hard thing to define, and we'd probably have to talk to them if they'd be open enough to let us know.
All right, do you happen to actually know what any of those businesses were that left the Port of Seattle for other ports?
I do know what they were, and I'm a little hesitant to use their names without authorization right now. But they are there, and they're the major shippers.
All right, tell us, what is HDS 21?
That's a harbor development strategy. And what HDS 21 is, the port said that it is to look at it and make the port better. What we looked at, it was manned. They took a half staff, half community, what they called community, and it turns out to be mostly, corporate heads and real estate people. They had, I think, one labor person that sat on the committee, but what they did is they restructured who the port was, and they're restructuring it from what it was designed to be and what it was voted in to be in 1911 to be a publicly owned and operated entity to protect us from private corporations. They've entered this ugly word of public-private partnerships, right? And so it's a matter of giving your public money to the private interests and say maybe they'll stay if we do that. But these people have enough money without our money. It's a gift, and it is a Washington state. It's found throughout Washington state, public-private partnerships. I believe the Nordstrom's complex received public-private partnership money. The stadiums use public-private partnership money. I mean, they enacted laws when they formed this state in the Constitution to say that public entities couldn't give gifts to corporations. And now we find it happening around us. The port lobbied and enacted a exclusion for the port so they could do it. So it's actually legal for them to give public money to private corporations. They can gift private money, but they can also gift public money to the poor. And that's in the state constitution also. And they totally ignore that. Well, they funnel millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars into corporations in this city and this county. They're totally ignoring the public.